Hello, everyone. This is Natalie with the Marketing Resolution YouTube channel. Thanks once again for joining us on these video casts. Today I have with me from Durham, England, Nancy Radford. Hello, Nancy. How are you?
Hi there. How are you?
I'm doing really well. We were just talking about how lovely our weather is, and it's put us both in good moods.
I think it makes everyone feel more sociable, doesn't it, when you get weather like this?
It does, but I also know that you're super busy, and I'm loving the success that you're seeing in your practice and all the good work that you're doing for training people in communication and how to deal with conflict or difficult personalities or issues in their workplace, whatever it might be. So I love, reconnecting with you and hearing that your practice has really reached running speeds.
Well, I think some of the tips you've given us helped as well. So, yeah, you did a talk for us for the Association of Northern Mediators, which people really enjoyed and appreciated. So thank you again for that.
Thanks very much. It was absolutely my pleasure. I like helping people. So in your practice, you do a variety of services and programs for people, and you've even written a book about how people can best use the communication skills that you teach them. Can I ask you first to tell us a little bit about your book?
Yeah, sure. It was done for the Business Expert Press. So what they were looking for was a book that was based on academic research, but was grounded in everyday. So you're looking for people who are doing management courses, but are actually working at the same time. Mm-hmm. So I put forward a proposal to do something called conflict first aid, which is about how people can follow the principles of first aid, which is kind of to prevent harm and restore healing. And so I did a lot of research for it as well, and I really enjoyed doing that. So it's got lots of little practical tips and tools based on positive psychology theory and mediation and conflict theory. So.
Very nice, very nice. Because I know that it may sound counterintuitive, but I know that one of your sincere wishes is that no one ever need use our services.
Yeah, I know it sounds really funny, but I also tell people that I think my aim in life generally is to make myself redundant, because as a parent, if you don't make yourself redundant, your kids can't manage without you, and hopefully you'll die before they will. And it's the same as a manager. I've always seen, making myself redundant, because there's always work for you. And it's the same as a mediator. There's so many times do particularly workplace mediations, neighborhood mediations, where it's gone on for months, if not years. And people turn around and say, I wish we'd had that conversation earlier. And although it's nice that they had it now, it would be much better if they had it earlier. So that's kind of my passion behind it. And interestingly enough, I've been busier as a mediator.
Well, it is really nice, though, for us as professionals to teach people the communication skills, the conflict management skills, to not just teach them those skills, but give them some actual phrases or some actual things that they can do to help themselves, so that when something is just an issue, it can be addressed, that there's no need for it to become a conflict or a full-blown dispute. And with just a little bit of training, just a little bit of assistance, we really can make a difference in people's regular daily home lives and work lives. Yeah. And so the work you do is really powerful work.
And the more I do mediations, the more I find that people actually, if you get them calmed down enough and thinking, because when people are in conflict, they get this huge kind of shutdown of their thinking bit, and you have all the rage and the fear and the anger and everything else, so you're not thinking straight. And if you can get people calmed down and listen to them and let them talk through the problem. And this morning I had someone turn up And I just asked her some questions and let her talk through it. And at the end, I said, so what do you think you should do now? And it's kind of like, oh, yeah. Because people often just need those questions. They know the answers. It's just like opening a door and helping them through.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I know that on your website, which I'll go ahead and just blatantly plug, it's nancyradford.com. It's an excellent website, and you give lots of tools, lots of resources for people. And I know that you're very open to having people email you and call you and ask questions and see if they can't find, some way to move themselves forward out of their difficult situations. And so I'll put the website in the description bar for everyone to click on, and so they can find you there in the Durham, England area. So I'm curious, I know that prior to your work as a resolutionist, you were a midwife. How did you make the switch from midwifery into mediation?
Well, I'm one of the people that tend to kind of go with the flow. So if there's an opportunity there, I'll take it. I think I was probably a mediator before I was a midwife, because I was a middle child of 4. And I was the one that always sorted out all the arguments. But in all the different jobs I've had, because I was a mediator, I did research, I did a lot of management, we had our own business. My role's kind of always been the same, because it's been to help people do stuff themselves, sort of to give them the confidence, calm them down enough that they see their own strengths and they can do the stuff. So as a midwife, you can't actually deliver the baby yourself. You've got to help the mother have the confidence to do it and make a safe place. So mediation and midwifery and management, it's all about making a safe space for people to do their best, be their best.
To find their own way.
Yeah. And I think I was in a job and I could have stayed there till I was retired. But I thought, you know what? I've always wanted to do, learn to do mediation, and now's the chance. So I kind of took a leap of faith 5 years ago and went off and started yet another career.
Well, we are all very glad that you did, very grateful that you did. What's your favorite part about the work you do? What's your favorite bit in a mediation room?
I think it's when the light suddenly dawns on somebody that they don't have to be miserable, and they don't have to put up, even if the other person doesn't want to do what you can do, you can choose to still go ahead. And it's seeing them suddenly realize, do you know what? I don't have to let what that person did to me, or the money I've lost, or whatever it is, lock me up anymore. I can move on. And I think that's just so wonderful to see.
Yeah. That is one of the great benefits in mediation. A lot of people really like that it's confidential, it's faster than the courts, it's friendlier than the courts, it's less aggressive than the courts. There are lots of great benefits to it. But I talk to so many people who tell me that the best thing about it was the great cathartic release that they had from going to a mediation. Because when you go to court and you have an advocate, you don't actually get to tell your story. Someone else interprets your story and they give their version of your story. And in a mediation, you actually get to be the person talking, and you get to tell your story at your speed, using your language, letting your emotions and your opinions and your thoughts come through. And there's a great power in that.
Yeah, I think it was Maya Angelou said, there's no greater agony than an untold story. And I thought that's so true. And I had quite a complicated mediation with quite a lot of parties. And after the mediation, I got this lovely note that said, it was the first time that we felt we'd been listened to and understood. And I thought, yeah, that's what it's about.
Yeah, that is exactly what it's all about. So the resolution does come. I know that I happen to love, people come in and they've been at this, this thing, this conflict, this dispute, this issue for a while normally. And they come in, all tense and tight, and some of them ready to go to fisticuffs. And more often than not, when they walk out, they shake hands. I've seen them hug in the corridors when we're finished. They're smiling. And you know that for the first time in a long time, they're going to get a good night's rest. It's a burden lifted from their shoulders.
And you can see their postures change, can't you?
Yeah. And it's, you and I have talked that it's a bit like, someone sprinkles fairy dust over the room.
Yeah.
Some witchcraft or sorcery involved. And it's nothing that magical, but communication does have that power.
Yeah, and I think it's the listening to, and as you say, having the chance to actually say what you want. And sometimes people don't know what they want. I mean, I had one client in a workplace mediation, and she said, well, actually, all I want is money to sort this issue. And when we were talking it through, she realized that the money wasn't the big issue. That no amount of money would actually heal the pain. It was the talking through and seeing that other people acknowledged her pain. And that was a big, that was something she hadn't known herself till we talked through it.
Yeah. And workplace issues, they really are so important, because for many of us, we spend more hours, more time, more of ourselves invested in our work environment than we do at home with a spouse or a child, sadly. And so when issues arise in a workplace, it has a devastating effect on us.
Yeah, and on the family, because if you're annoyed with your boss and you don't feel safe to tell off your boss, you go home and you yell at your wife or your kids or whatever.
That's exactly right. And now, in addition to your book, you also do trainings.
Yeah. So one of the things I find is people in caring professions and charities find it really difficult to give negative feedback, because they see themselves, I'm a nice person. I don't want to tell so-and-so that what they're doing is breaking the rules or really demotivating to other staff. So I don't actually bring the subject up until it becomes a major issue. And then I might explode, or I might make them redundant,
Gosh.
And it happens because people don't know how to set boundaries, and they don't know how to say no and enforce boundaries. So one of the, I've been talking to this charity that helps carers, and they were wanting some conflict training. And we'd been, charities, there's always something more pressing to spend the money on. And then I got rang up and they said, could you come and do a mediation? And I said, yeah, I could do the mediation. And after the mediation, they said to me, let's get some dates in the diary for the training. So, and I did sort of 3 lots of 2-hour sessions with all their senior managers. And the first lot was on managing yourself in conflict, because unless you can kind of get the stories that you tell yourself, understand how your brain works, what your triggers are, it's really difficult to manage other people, because being calm and in control is contagious. So if you're really angry, you can't think straight. If you're scared, you can't think straight. So it was teaching them some practical tools that would help them keep calm and keep the right sort of outlook towards it. And then the second session was about useful tips for managing others in conflict. And the first one is, do you wade in or do you walk on by? and to sort of how to assess whether this is something that as a manager I need to get involved in, or this is something that they're managing fine, they're grown-ups, they can deal with, it's not impacting work. And then the final session was around how do we avoid getting into these really tricky situations. And you do that by setting the boundaries, being clear about what the consequences are, and helping people address them at an early stage, and speaking up, but not in a, nagging, horrible way, but just stating your path. So
right. Now, I've never done a workplace mediation, and so I can only ask questions about it. But I would assume that there is some challenge also, not just from the managers and going downstream, but also for the employees, because there is that power dissonance. And so I would assume that it's a challenge for the employees to speak up and manage any management conflict, because they don't want to put their jobs at risk.
Yeah, and I think in Britain, there's quite a lot of protection for people around the jobs. And it's one of the things I always say in a workplace mediation, particularly if it's about changing their status, or they want, they think they're going to have to leave. And that's to talk to an employment lawyer first to find out what their legal position is. But it's interesting you talk about power dissonance, because the power isn't always where you think the power is. So, for example, one of the places where I worked, they had a very kind of one of these people who, I've never had a problem with anybody in my life before. I can't see how anybody has a problem with mine, And the CEO, actually said that none of us wanted to speak to this person because of the very kind of, so that was a very odd situation. But yeah, it's getting people, and I usually try before I bring people together to get them in a position where they see that they both need each other. And certainly in Britain, it's probably easier because there are a lot of employment protection, and that, if you've got unfair dismissal, you can take stuff to an employment tribunal. There's no fee for the employees to take things to the employment tribunal. And the employer, so if you have a settlement agreement, the employer has to pay for an independent legal advisor for the employee. So, but yeah, it's talking to both of them and saying, look, what is it you really want? And how can you persuade them to do what you want? What's in it for them to do what you want them to do?
Right, that's right. But I still love most that your goal is that they don't need you, that you give them these tools, you give them these resources, you give them this training, and then your phone lines go completely silent.
That organization where I did the training, they've had me back again. The mediation was like, oh. And they said, yeah, but we're calling you in much earlier because we've tried all the things.
Well, at least they did learn that they now know better, and they know to call you when it's just an issue and hasn't become a full-blown litigated nightmare. So that's a really good thing.
And I think it is, if you give people, it's like we can all cut our own hair, can't we? And we'll maybe cut our toddler's hair, but we wouldn't really cut it. We'd rather pay someone else to do it. So it's kind of knowing, it's like first aid. If you know first aid, you make the job of hospitals much better and you save more lives. But it doesn't mean that you're going to do an appendectomy or, heart surgery. So it's, I think, educating people about how things can work, make them understand what expertise is and things. So.
Well, and I think the more training that you give them, they probably understand more about themselves.
Yeah.
And can better manage their own filters. They can better understand their own biases. They can better understand their own positions. And so that that knowledge, that self-awareness probably encourages a tolerance that they may not have had previously. Because once you point out to people that the environment in which we're raised, plays a big role. So obviously my filters are that I'm, a Caucasian, Gen X, female. And just those really basic labels, that does color the way in which I view the world.
Yeah.
And we all have those filters. But once you can identify that that's the way I see the world, that's not the way my neighbor sees the world. That's not the way my fellow congregants see the world. That's not the way my daughter sees the world. That's not the way my husband sees the world. It's not the way our colleagues see the world. And once you have that realization, it becomes much easier to listen to people.
Yeah. I use the example, John Sturrock, who's a great mediator. I don't know if you know John, but he says that, truth's kind of like a bit of cheese. And I say, yeah, you can have people who have Edam and they're going, yeah, cheese is red and it comes from Holland. And someone else maybe has some halloumi and they're going, Nick, that's not cheese. Cheese is white and it comes from Cyprus. And unless you can see their cheese and they can see your cheese, you're determined that your truth is the only truth and those people over there are telling lies. And it makes people laugh when you talk about that, but it does actually make them think, yeah, maybe. I mean, even something as simple as yelling. It depends how you were brought up. Some people feel that yelling is wrong at in any situation, and people who yell must be really mad at you. And other people might come from a big family or just a lot of loud mouths, and yelling is just the way, or they may, be used to talking to deaf people. You don't know. But it's just understanding that not everybody knows what you think is acceptable. And so it's getting back to this thing about being clear about what you expect and what upsets you, and finding a way of saying it so that it's not about you made me upset, but I get upset when I hear raised voices, or something like that.
Right. I think that that's exactly right. And I love the cheese analogy. I'll be borrowing that in future because that's
it's John's story.
Good way to explain it. Well, I'll ring up John and tell him that I'm taking his material and spreading it around the globe a little bit.
I'm sure he won't mind.
He's a really generous man. So, but that's an excellent analogy. So, what else would you like for us to know about your practice or how you can best help people?
I think I like working with people that want to continue relationships. So I do kind of three types of mediation. One is workplace. One is with small businesses and charities, which have, there's sometimes workplace issues. There's sometimes between the board or between the CEO and the board, or two partners who want to, one wants to grow the business, one wants to kind of consolidate. And I do some restorative justice work for the restorative hub around neighborhood disputes. And then I do special educational needs mediation, which is really interesting because we try and involve the young people, and understanding how someone with autism sees the world is really radically different, and balancing all those things. you know, I'm just feel really lucky to be able to be involved in such a great job. You know.
It is really good work that we do. I really like that 99.99% of the time, people are better off for having come to our offices than not. I really, really like that about our industry. But what I really want to say is that you and your practice are so impressive. What a heroine you are. You do good work.
I think it's the people who put the work, you know, when you see how people have suffered, and to make that shift where they kind of stop and think, actually, I don't want to be here anymore. And it's their hard work. I think it's just, I'm lucky enough to be there to kind of help them open the door. But it's about freeing people up and calming them down so that they can think clearly.
Well, and I know that you know, because you and I have chatted on other occasions, I know that a lot of what you do is ask the appropriate question that lets people communicate, maybe even for the first time, what really is at the core of the issue that they're bringing to your mediation room, and that you then respect them and you honor them enough that you listen to them, you hear what they say, and then encourage them to continue that communication. And that really is a powerful process for people, and so for that work, I thank you on behalf of, you know, pretty much all of humanity, because it really is good stuff.
Oh, thank you. But it's basically one of the other great books that I would recommend everybody reads, and that's Crucial Conversations, which takes you through some of the practical skills about communication. And I think that was one of the things that really made me want to get into mediation, because you can see the power of learning those skills.
One of my favorite books and it's rarely mentioned in our industry, but I've been, you know, the evangelical voice behind it for a long time. It's written by a man named George C. Thompson, and it's a book called Verbal Judo.
All right.
And he was an English professor who became a police officer. And as a young police officer, he was paired with a senior police officer. And the senior police officer had been around long enough to know that, you know, a lot of what you do and say has the same power as being in a physical interaction with people. And so it's called Verbal Judo. And it's a really short, you know, just sort of a chatty story book, kind of a read. And it gives you what he calls our swords of insertion. And so he gives you the actual phrase to use in various situations that moves people in a really positive way. It moves people, you know, off of their position and into a place of being able to have some communication or you know, realization about something. And he has since gone on to do great things and does most of the training for police forces and hostage negotiation teams and things like that. But this funny little book that I found in a used bookstore a couple of decades ago, Verbal Judo, it's a great book. And
I have to look that up, because it sounds like a really practical thing, because a lot of the people I work with don't have the time to read a lot. So something easy to read, you know, that they can just pick up, and it's great.
Yeah, some of the chapters in it are short enough that you could read them at a red light.
Mm-hmm.
But you can actually, you know, you finish that chapter and you get into your office and you can put it to work right away. So, but that's just one more of the resources and skills that you know, that we all should take better advantage of. Well, Nancy, what else would you like for us to know about you or your practice?
Oh, when you ask a question like that, it's kind of like I'm not that used to talking for long. It's usually listening.
That's all right. We can stop right there. I will encourage everyone to log on to Nancy's website, nancyradford.com. Again, I'll put the link in the description bar. Nancy, thank you so much for joining me and
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. It's been great, Natalie. Thanks.
You are more than welcome. I love chatting to you. Listen, everybody, if you enjoyed this video, as always, I will encourage you to subscribe, like, and share. If you know anybody who's having issues, difficulties, or would benefit from this training, and they're near Nancy in the Durham, England area, click the link, ring her up. She's an excellent resource for you to have. And as always, be good humans, and thanks for joining us.
Bye.